Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Teams for Business podcast. I'm your host, Kylan.
I'm Jackie.
And I'm Ivan.
Today, we'll be discussing the recent NBA draft along with business implications. So, did you guys watch or follow the draft, which was a couple nights ago? And then, any favorite players in the class of 2024?
Yeah, so don't really didn't really watch the draft, but definitely followed along on social media because I think next year there's someone named Cooper Flag who is gaining a lot of hype. So it's this draft class also has been had is very controversial because some people say it's like one of the worst draft classes. Others say it's very promising. But there's a lot of one of my favorite players definitely in the draft is Jared McCain, as I have said a lot about him in previous episodes of the podcast. But yeah, I just feel like a lot of the players in the draft class definitely do not have like the same hype as last year. You have Victor Wembanyama, who's like everybody knew about. But this year's draft class is like some people you've never heard of talked about unless you like follow college basketball really closely. So yeah, that's kind of my opinions.
Yeah. I'm kind of the opposite. I usually don't follow along for basketball like at all. Um, but I think on like the draft day, I was out with some friends and then like on one of the TVs, they were like playing the draft for some reason. And then the way I happened to be sitting, I was just like looking at it. But so like I did watch the draft, but I don't follow it. But I also did see on social media just like a few random posts about just like the events going on. Um, I heard that there was some drama about like people's like families or like significant other partner issues, things like that. And then also like LeBron James's son. So I don't really follow basketball, but I think like the hype or like from an outsider's perspective, I feel like the drama around it was to me like more than like much more than what I heard about the actual draft itself.
Yeah, I think nowadays like most people aren't really just like watching the TV for the draft anymore. They're kind of just like maybe after the draft is over, you kind of check what player your team, whatever team you're a fan of drafted. Just because watching the draft in itself is kind of boring, I guess, unless you're out and you're just in a restaurant like Jackie was. But I think, yeah, and this class is kind of like people on social media like kind of been hating that they've been hating on this class of players just because there isn't any like specific like superstars just like right off the bat. So it's kind of it's mostly been hype around like names that people know like Bronny James, like LeBron James' son. And I guess going off of that, Bronny was drafted with the 55th pick in this year's draft, which is near the very end of the draft, but he is still one of the most talked about players in this draft just because of his dad. So I guess this has been a kind of controversial topic. Do you think he deserves to be in the NBA and get an NBA contract, or do you think if he does get that contract, it's going to be mostly because of who he is in relation to LeBron?
Yeah, so Bronny is definitely very controversial. And from my personal perspective, looking back on his history of playing basketball in middle school and high school, it's been well documented, and he has been consistently like at least a top 20 player in at least his class, right? I think everybody usually forgets that he got into cardiac arrest before playing his freshman season at USC, which possibly might have impacted his ability to play basketball during that year. But I definitely think at this current state, um, he is in the NBA mostly because of his dad. Like he's getting a lot of chances to redeem himself. Of his lackluster performance in his first college season, because of his dad. And a lot of people online are actually saying like they're not doubting Bronny's ability to play basketball. It's just that he hasn't proven himself on the court. And a lot of people saying like if he has one more year of college basketball, then he'll be solidly within the top maybe like 30 picks in the NBA draft because he just needs that 1 year to grow and to improve upon his game, especially after such a serious health implication, and kind of go back to his days where he's consistently top 20 in his age group.
Yeah, so like again, I'm not like the biggest like basketball follower, but like from what I've heard and just like seen online about Bronny James is that like a lot of people aren't really happy that he got drafted and they're saying it's just like because of his father. And like I think like I feel like it'll be a lie to say like that wasn't true. Like I feel like most people acknowledge it. It's more of the fact like is it okay versus like is it not okay? Um and then like also again like basketball like height, I feel like that's a pretty big thing. Like he's not like considered tall for like a basketball player, just like 6'2", which is like tall for that like the normal person. But besides that, yes, I think like yeah, like his dad was probably part of the reason, but I am curious to see like how he goes because like we have like this thing like even outside of basketball, it's just like nepo babies and like even like for example in Hollywood, just like some of them actually do really well, but some of them are like nothing really happens with them. So I am curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, I think that like at this point, he definitely should have stayed for another year. I don't think that if he wasn't LeBron's son, he probably would not have gotten drafted. Just with the cardiac arrest and the health issues and kind of just getting back into it his freshman year at USC and not being able to get a lot of play time because he was coming off the bench and USC had other kind of like star players there as well. So I don't know. I guess I don't know what went to his decision declaring for the draft this year. It might have been because of his dad, because his dad wanted that his dad is up for a new LeBron's up for a new contract extension this offseason as well. So that could have all played into it. So I personally think that yeah, I don't think this especially this year, I don't think he kind of deserved to be drafted in a sense, but I don't think he's going to be a bad NBA player either. I think as long as he spends time kind of developing and especially with the Lakers, he's gonna have a lot of opportunity to kind of like watch and grow. And I guess going into that, he kind of got drafted to the Lakers because of his agent. So his LeBron's agent is Rich Paul, who is pretty famous, and he kind of threatened teams other than the Lakers and the Suns, basically telling them that if those teams drafted Bronny, that Bronny would just not play in the NBA and he would move overseas and go play over there, which is just kind of crazy for somebody who isn't even like a top player that your agent would be threatening teams to not draft you. So I guess what do you think about this? And do you think that players should have that kind of power to be able to have your agent kind of tell teams like if you draft if you draft me, I'm just not gonna play for you.
I mean, in my opinion, I definitely say like in general, players definitely should have some type of control over what teams they want to be playing for because playing for a team that you don't really want to play for, you don't really play your best, right? You'd be like, oh, get me out of here. So I definitely say like players definitely should have some control, right? And they, so to a certain extent, they do because, in the before the NBA draft, like these prospects would go to team like workouts for specific teams to let them talk to the coaches and then play some basketball, right? To for the coaches and the managers to see how well a prospect really plays, and there has been a lot of instances like dating back decades of prospects and players simply just not playing good because they just don't want to play that team, so they just purposely just don't play good at the workouts. And I think it's kind of something like here, like you can't really, as a player, you play the best in an environment that you like. And um, although the Bronny James situation is probably an outlier because people usually don't threaten to play overseas. um, when they to, in order to get drafted into a specific team. But other NBA players do have some control over which team could select them. Like they can play purposely really well for one team and purposely really bad for another team, and they can adjust accordingly to which teams to make which teams like him more and which teams to like him less. And so I think players definitely should have some power, but that Bronny James is definitely like the extreme side.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that take. This is so random, but his agent is dating Adele. I just thought that was a fun fact to throw in. Or like they're married or something like that. But anyway, I think like it's definitely like kind of insane to think about. Because like considering who he is and like outside of family wise, just like his playability, like for someone who's like not even that great of a player, um, or like right now currently compared to like other people in like the draft, um, like I just feel like it's kind of insane to be able to do that. And for someone who is like doesn't follow it, going to Australia is just like it just seems so random. And like while I do agree with Ivan's take about like yes, they should have like kind of a say in like where they go, but at the end of the day, it's like a draft. Like you go where you go, right? Like it like yes, I guess you should have some pick, but that way like everyone's going to want to play for like the current best teams. And I don't think it's fair for everyone to just be like, oh, I'm gonna play for this person, not play for that team. Like I think like yes, they should have like some preference or something that factors into it. But at the end of the day, like if you're not Bronny, I don't think that everyone should get that much of a say.
I agree. I think it's like mostly in these drafts, you don't really see players kind of like, I guess like telling teams to not draft them because they want to get drafted higher just because there's more money if you get drafted higher. That's where the money is at. So, I mean, I kind of agree with the point like Ivan mentioned earlier that like if you do like bad situations can kind of like derail your career to a sense where you kind of see in the past some top picks have been just put in horrible situations and they haven't been able to develop at all. And that's how they kind of fall out of the league in like 5 years. I guess it is kind of like a gamble, but at the end of the day, I don't think players should be, especially if you're not like top three, top five player. I don't think players should be kind of telling teams not to draft them. That's bad for the player in general as well. Like, um, I'm not sure why Bronny wanted specifically the Suns as well as the I guess Lakers make sense because of his dad, but the Suns as well. So um that's pretty interesting. But I guess moving on to our next topic, which is going to be like international players in this draft. The three of the top six players in this year's draft were international picks, which means they were not playing in the US for college or high school. And more specifically, they were actually all from France. And last year, we also saw Victor Wembanyama, who is like a generational prospect. He also came from France. And the current like top three NBA players, I think consensus wise, include Jokic and Luka Doncic, who are international players as well. And I feel like the NBA is slowly moving away from being kind of dominated by the USA. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely think, well, the facts literally do say like there are more and more international players going to NBA. I think one of the biggest reasons is definitely because how accessible everything is now, right? Like maybe if you go back maybe 20, 30 years, it was really difficult for NBAs to scout in any other country than the United States. But now, with the age of technology and being able to fly wherever you want, be having a lot of money, you can go to like various countries to scout players, and those players can come to US to be scouted, right? So I think one of the biggest factors is definitely technology, and that it is much easier to for players to travel around, especially internationally. But I think another point I think I read about online, and why international players are suddenly dominating the scene is because the fundamentals of basketball is actually different. Like in the U.S., I'm pretty sure Kaiwin would know because he has like experience playing like uh basketball, in school, outside of school. But in these tournaments, they're playing what 4 or 5 games every weekend. And that's very taxing, especially as like a young recruit with a promising recruit. You're dunking for 4 or 5 games on a weekend, and that comes with a lot of risks and injury risks, like knees, especially knees, like look your ligaments. You have a lot likely injury. Like what we recently just had someone go down with an ACL injury, in the WNBA. I forgot her name, but like if you keep on playing games at a high stress level, which is the United States, you're gonna get these injuries, right? Especially in knee. You had um Lonzo Ball, right? He has like he got his meniscus was totally degraded. His cartilage in his knee is completely gone, and then he can't play in the NBA basically, unless he gets like some top of the line treatment, which he did, and it's not very. The consensus is that he's not ready for an NBA because his injury risk is still too great. So there's a lot of knee injuries, especially maybe even hip, bone injuries, that associated with um I'm associated with playing basketball at a very young age for a very long time, and um that's the US philosophy of basketball. But in the Europe, they usually aren't as intense. They don't have 4 or 5 games back to back on a weekend. They give players time to develop, and they give players the chance to, you're not a star player everywhere you go in Europe. Like in the US, if you're a star player, you're gonna start in every single team you play on. But in the Europe, you get thrown into, if you're really good, you get thrown into the adult leagues, right? So like you have Luka Doncic literally dominating the Euro League at 18. And then for the NBA scouts, they're like, hey, this guy's literally playing at a top level at a young age. And you can see there's evidence. But um, for the US, the only top level we get is college freshmen playing other college freshmen and super seniors, right? And you don't really get that sense of, I know he will definitely prosper in the NBA because this person has only been playing people his age. He has not been playing people 10 years older, even 5 years older than him in the EuroLeague, right? If you know a player can play against adults, then you know he will prosper in the NBA. So that's why I think more and more international players are coming in the NBA draft and getting drafted in like the top 3 picks.
Yeah. Well, my take is a little bit less statistically backed than that. But I do think that like the NBA is slowly moving away from being like so dominated by US player or like US born native players. Um and I think that's just because like almost like a cultural thing. Like basketball, like it's not just like a US centered. Like there's a lot of sports out there that like I think are pretty like country dominated, if that makes sense. Like for example, soccer, like yeah, it's a pretty big thing in the US, but it's not like it's not as big in like for example Europe. But like for example, like American football is, big in America. Like yes, it's big in other countries, okay, but like specifically in the US. But like I think basketball has kind of expanded and has done a really good job in that sense. And then for like the business aspect of things, like less so regarded and like the NBA player thing, but just business solely, I think is also like a good move for there to be like international expansion because now you have like a much bigger market. Like just because you have more international players being in the NBA doesn't mean like the American population is like less interested in the NBA all of a sudden, but now you have like this additional market from like this other country. And so I definitely think like business wise, it's also a really good idea and also beneficial that they are expanding.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I just think that I think the NBA is slowly becoming a little bit more balanced. I think in the past we didn't really see, especially like maybe even 10 years ago, like 2015, 2016, when the Warriors were winning championships. I don't think international players really were that prominent. I couldn't name I don't think I can name like a star international player at that point in time. So the fact that slowly these European players are coming in and kind of dominating kind of shows that maybe the NBA wasn't really doing like talent evaluation wise, they weren't really thinking about possibly getting these guys from Europe who are like 7'3" and they can handle the ball too. So it's kind of crazy that now that the best players in the league are international and more players in the draft um are instead of picking guys who played a year of college, they're picking guys who played internationally because the competition that they play in Europe is probably even better than college basketball because of how tough that EuroLeague is. So I guess this is a kind of a follow-up question. Do you think the fact that the international basketball scene is so strong, does this have any implications for Olympic basketball? Because I know the US kind of created a super team this year, but I still don't feel like they're kind of guaranteed to win the Olympics. If anything, it might be even harder than 4 years ago. So I guess do you think that the US is still going to be the favorites going forward for Olympic basketball?
I definitely think that the USA redemption team is definitely a very experienced roster. Like, if you look at maybe some other contenders, maybe like Serbia, like would they have Jokic, but France, a lot of promising people. You have Rudy Gobert and also Victor Wembanyama. So a lot of rosters from around the world are definitely very promising. But the U.S. just brings like maybe other countries have like one or two NBA players, right? But like Canada has a ton, but um, if you look at the U.S., you have players with decades of experience, quite literally, and that experience just comes in handy. And I think I definitely agree that you have a lot of superstars in that team, right? And the U.S. did get defeated by Spain. I think it was, and it was and that team comprised of a couple of NBA players, like Austin Reeves. I remember, I think also Anthony Edwards is also on that team. But I think it's easy to get distracted by the amount of superstars on the Team USA currently because just say, oh yeah, they're definitely great players. No one doubts that. But how about their ability to work together as a team, right? Basketball in the end is still a very team oriented sport rather than individual performance, especially on the world stage. And it really got to see like a team that was definitely team played rather than a team that was individually played in like a lot of basketball games around the world, and the US did get defeated by one of them. And um but it's also really easy to say that, oh, US is going to be completely destroyed. But like the US team played by like a couple of maybe fifth mans, like six mans, are like they barely got beaten by Spain, like very barely. Like I think the point gap was like maybe 5 or 6 points, right? So I think with a roster that is so experienced, has played in other world basketball championships, even including the Olympics, they definitely do bring. They know that the game is different than in the U.S. than in the world, and they'll probably train for it as it is their last, most likely their last Olympics, and they can't get humiliated like that. So they're definitely gonna decide to set aside their own individual implications and try to work together as a team USA, to take the Olympic gold. So that's kind of my opinion, on the Team USA situation currently.
Yeah, I agree. Once again, I feel like my take is like a little bit like less basketball centered, back to the stats and stuff. But like looking at their team, there's like a lot of big names there, and I think like at the end of the day, like yeah, like they're not like guaranteed to win. Like it's not like a crazy good chance for them, but like I think that's like just like in the Olympic spirit of things. Like I feel like it'd be really boring to watch. Like that the USA is gonna win. Like I just don't think like that's like I think it makes it better that like people are like, oh, like are they gonna win, or like is it like that, thinking about okay like what's actually gonna happen. The same way like in sports, like that's why upsets people like rooting for the underdog, things like that. I don't know, like people are just like watching things like when you're not 100% guaranteed for something to happen. So I think like in the Olympic spirit, I think it's better that it's not like guaranteed to win, but at the same time, I do think like because of all that star power and just experience, and like having that combined goal, I think it definitely is like I don't know, like they do have the upper hand in my opinion. And also like it's kind of like we just talked about like foreign like internationals, um, in like the NBA, but at the end of the day, it's still like it's still the NBA in the United States. And like yes, there are a lot of like incredible like international players, but at the end of the day, it's still like largely comprised of like Native American players. Like for better or for worse, that's just like statistically.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, especially this year's team, I think just because it's like a last run for kind of the bigger names like LeBron and Steph, the fact that they all want to play for this year's team. I think past couple Olympics maybe they didn't play, and I know the USA last time they played international like Olympic basketball, they did lose. They did get beat, so it's kind of like they need the redemption this year. So in 2024, I'm definitely if I were to put my money on a team, it would definitely be the United States basketball team. So that's it for today. And thank you guys so much for tuning in with us. And we'll hope you join us next week for our next episode.